patience for that. But with that in mind, just take a moment to consider a seat. Finding a space maybe on a block or a chair, wherever it makes sense for you at this moment, however you're meeting this moment this morning. All right, well, welcome everyone to Yoga for Health and Resilience. This 10-week series of 90-minute classes is offered through Yoga X, which is a special initiative of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences in the School of Medicine at Stanford University. This evidence-based protocol is designed by Dr. Christiane Brems, who's clinical faculty and the program director at Yoga X. My name is Gino Carvalho. I'm the program manager at Yoga X, and it is my pleasure and honor to guide you through this practice. Today, you may want to have a couple of yoga blocks. It'll probably be nice to have a strap. You'll probably like to have a little bit of wall space and maybe even a chair. A blanket might also be nice to soften the floor. So just think about those resources and how you might position them in a way that they might be available to you. If you've been practicing with us for the last 3 weeks, it's probably become pretty familiar that I run off this list of resources and props, and we definitely provide those options to play with these props in a way that supports our practice and makes everything a lot more accessible, a lot more inviting. And once you've found your resources and strategically placed them within reach, come back to that seat, considering what allows you to feel grounded. And even if you're sitting on a chair, I'll invite you to perhaps just move forward so that you can allow the spine to be free. And we'll begin to settle into this present moment, into this place, wherever you are, and into this amazing community. Take a moment to consider a choice for placing your hands. Maybe it's palms down on your thighs. Maybe it's with the palms facing upward, but just take a moment to make that intentional choice. And as you settle and ground, and also invite a little bit of extension upward, with the eyes still open, just take a moment to consider your environment. Just take in the environment, the floor, the walls. Maybe just noting the familiarity of the environment, making a little connection. And after taking in the environment with your eyes open, when it feels inviting to you, maybe making a choice with the eyes, perhaps lowering the gaze or lowering the eyelids to half mast, or maybe closing the eyes, maybe turning the focus inward. And just as we have for the last few weeks, I invite you to take a moment to check into all the layers of experience. Perhaps taking a moment to notice the reverberations of the week and noticing how they are showing up in this moment. Notice if there is anything to observe in the body, perhaps a sense of heaviness or fatigue, or maybe a sense of grounding. Maybe taking a moment to notice if there's a sense of activation or restlessness, or maybe even something that feels like alertness. Or perhaps just noticing if there might be a sense of harmony, a sense of equilibrium. Just note how this is showing up in the body for you in this moment. And then bringing your awareness to the breath, just take a moment to notice how your vital self is showing up. Perhaps noticing if there is a state of arousal or a sense of lethargy, dullness, or maybe a sense of resilience and balance. And just taking a moment to check in and notice the energetic experience, just simply taking note without needing to judge or getting caught up with any story. And then gently turn your awareness to these qualities that may be present in the mind. And just notice the mental or emotional experience in this moment. And from a place of compassion, invite a sense of curiosity. Again, free from judgment, rooted in kindness and care. Just notice this act of observing yourself, witnessing the experience unfold in the body, the breath, the mind. Just noticing this inner witness and this intuitive wisdom of the observer. And invite a recognition of your connection with community. Perhaps this community right here, or other communities. Just noticing your connection to the greater web of life. Maybe noticing the potential for joy, the seed of joy that comes from that connection. And I invite you to perhaps bring your hands to heart center, if that feels auspicious for you, and maybe consider an intention for our time together today. Perhaps something that you've been working on, or maybe there's something new. Perhaps just a simple word or phrase, or maybe it's just a sense. Maybe it's something that's pre-verbal or transverbal. And if nothing's coming up right now, perhaps just leaving a little space for something that can arise in our time together. And with an inhale, I invite you to breathe that into your heart. And with your exhale, perhaps sending it out to your community. And I invite you to lower your hands and lift your gaze if your eyes were closed. And once again, welcome everyone. So this is our fourth session, and this series is a expression of integrated and holistic yoga. And it's designed to take us through all aspects of our integration and our holism as individuals and collectively. And we started this journey together by exploring the koshas, and you may have heard some of those described in our opening centering, these layers of experience: physical body, the breath, vitality, the mental emotional experiences, our deeper observer and witness or wisdom, and then our connection to community and the greater web of life. We built on that by exploring the first two limbs of yoga. We explored the yamas, the ethical foundations or the ethical aspirations, and the niyamas, the skills for purposeful living. So today, we will explore the third limb of yoga, asana. And asana is about movement. It's about how we move, but also how we find stillness, or literally how we find our seat. So asana is connected to movement and our physiology, and but also it's connected to the embodiment of our nervous system states. And the embodiment of our nervous system states is very closely aligned with a yoga philosophy framework of the gunas. So today we will explore asana through the gunas. And the gunas, in an interpretation of the gunas, is that they are the fundamental qualities of nature expressed through you and through all your layers of self. And nature expresses itself in many different ways, right? So some expressions are very kinetic and very active, maybe even aggressive or volatile. Some expressions are more grounded and steady, and maybe even dull and lethargic. Some expressions may be very integrated and connected, and perhaps very balanced and harmonious, and even have resilience. And these qualities exist within us at all times. And we develop particular tendencies for these expressions, making some qualities a little more prominent than others. And a lot of that is caused by our developmental conditioning of the nervous system. And from a modern scientific perspective, these expressions correspond with the different states of the autonomic nervous system. So the first guna that we'll explore is rajas. Rajas is interpreted, a translation that we could use is motion or activation. So we could think of this as the sympathetic nervous system, this expression of preparedness or fight flight. And this is the ability to mobilize and protect yourself, but also it is something that drives our passion, right? This drive, a drivenness, and maybe even in a more extreme state, something that's very aggression, restlessness, agitation. Another one of the qualities of these expressions is tamas. Tamas translates or interpreted can be mass or grounding. It can also feel like an experience of stabilizing. So you can think of this as the parasympathetic nervous system state sometimes when activation doesn't work and a threat persists. The nervous system might disengage and withdraw and perhaps even shut down or disassociate in some of these states, depending on developmental conditioning and how these experiences unfold. And then there's another state of the gunas. The final one that we'll explore is sattva. And sattva translates or is interpreted as luminosity. Again, something that we might experience as resilience and balance of those two rajas and tamas experiences. And this is when the nervous system is functioning optimally, and there's perhaps a very stable environment that fosters a sense of resilience, even in the face of challenges. This quality may be expressed as, feelings of lightness and perhaps even an invitation of more social engagement and problem-solving ability. And as you explore these states of nature, you may realize that you've embodied all of these qualities at different times. But you may also notice that you have a dominant tendency that tends to show up depending on circumstances that you encounter. So today, as we move through our asana practice, I'll invite you to tune into your nervous system and notice if you're becoming agitated and may benefit from a little more stillness, or perhaps notice if you are experiencing some sluggishness or a dullness, and maybe you'll be served by energizing yourself. And this is something that only you can know by checking in, taking this moment. You know your body best, you know your experience best. I can't provide that for you, but I'll try to provide those invitations for you to take that time to tune in, to check in, and feel empowered to make a choice that serves you best today. So building on the theme of last week, which we explored the middle way, right? Finding this middle way between extremes. We'll continue to cultivate this sense of balance and equanimity, and we'll start by a breathing practice called alternate nostril breathing. It's also called Nadi Shodhana. And this breathing practice is intended to bring balance into the nervous system, moving away from the extremes, just like last week with our middle way. And there's a sense of hopefully cultivating integration in feeling that equanimity within all of our layers. So this practice has a mudra, or a hand position that can that you can choose to explore. You really want to pick the hand position that works best for you, that's easy for you to employ, depending on your comfort level with the hands and how you like touching your face, right? So alternate nostril breathing involves closing one nostril while inviting the air into or out of the other nostril. And one of the mudras that is often used is kind of this Vulcan salute. Okay, yep, I'm 150 years old. But you might take these peace fingers in the middle, and you can use them to kind of separate the thumb and the ring finger into these two sides of the hand that end up working like a little bit of a pivot. You can always take those peace fingers to your third eye and allow for the thumb and the ring finger to act on the nostrils, either closing them, or at times you'll actually invite a little bit of space, perhaps, and it's a real subtle thing. None of these interactions between the hand and the nose or the cheeks or anything are supposed to be really aggressive and forcing the issue. We want to invite a sense of subtlety in this interaction. So you can use the fingers at the third eye. You can also bring those fingers down. If you're going to drink tea, you can always leave your pinky out there if you'd like to do that as well. And if it works best for you to use your index finger and thumb and work through your breath in whatever way is most efficient for you, go ahead and make that choice. So you might consider playing with that a little bit as I describe a few more things in this setup. Okay, so another thing that we'll do that you heard in the opening kind of centering is, rather than laying down like we have in some of our other openings or inviting that half position, we'll really invite a sense of extending the spine upward and finding kind of a plumb line by grounding down. So just take a moment wherever you are. Perhaps if you've been seated for a while, maybe if you were in a cross-legged position, it might feel nice to switch the cross of your legs. And begin to settle into the seat in such a way that allows you to really ground down and extend up. And you might be able to sense a kind of gravitational rebound that happens as a result of that, right? So you ground down, or think about reaching up and you'll kind of naturally ground down, providing a little bit of stability in the middle. And as you begin to find your seat, settle in and just take a moment to once again check into the physical body and just notice how it's showing up after this little pause. Consider the natural curves of the spine. And once again, consider what you would like to do with your eyes. Maybe you feel fine just closing the eyes and turning the focus inward. Maybe there's just a little bit of an opening at the bottom as you navigate some of the hand positions. And before starting with the alternate nostril breathing, just take a moment to really become curious about the breath. As you turn your focus inward, just notice the breath cycle, this natural breath cycle that exists, noticing the qualities and sensations of the inhale, and qualities, sensations of the exhale, maybe the texture, the sound, the duration. Just noticing without judging, just checking in. And notice how the breath and the body are interacting. Perhaps you notice places in the body that are expanding on the inhale, perhaps places that are contracting on the exhale. Maybe it's down by the low ribs. Maybe you notice the movement of the diaphragm. Perhaps even noticing a sensation of a cool stream of air coming through the nose on the inhale. Maybe noticing a little bit of warmth as the breath flows out on the exhale. And just continue to cultivate that curiosity about the dance between the breath and the body. Noticing all those little subtle nuances. And from that place of curiosity, checking in with the subtlety. When you're ready, begin on the next breath cycle after your next exhale. Begin by closing the right nostril and inhaling through the left. And at the top of the inhale, closing the left nostril and exhaling through the right. Keeping the left nostril closed, invite an inhale through the right nostril, close the right nostril, and invite the exhale through the left. Keeping the right nostril closed, invite the inhale through the left nostril, close the left nostril, invite the exhale through the right nostril, and continue with that cycle. So there's an exhale followed by an inhale, then a close. And you may notice that there's a natural nostril dominance that takes place. This is often something that evolves throughout the day. You might notice when you wake up, one of your nostrils a little more clear than the other. It's really normal. Without getting a story about this, just allow for the breath to unfold and notice if any shift occurs. Continuing to be very subtle and allowing for the breath to work through the nostrils, trying to avoid any tendency to breathe through the mouth if possible. Sometimes this is even done without physically closing the nostrils. So just check into the subtleties and take 2 more rounds of this alternate nostril breathing on your own. Once you've completed those 2 breath cycles, just return to a normal breathing cycle. And just once again, tune into all your layers of experience and take a moment to just notice if there's any shift that's occurred as a result of your practice without expecting anything, but also still being open to noticing if any shift occurred. If it feels inviting, you can even take your hands to your heart. And once again, just kind of check in with all the layers, but particularly at the heart center. Noticing that the breath has this capacity to bring a little more awareness to all of those mechanisms of self-regulation. Once again, without expecting them or having a story about them, just being open to noticing what's unfolding. Maybe even bringing your awareness back to the intention you set, or maybe just noticing if a new intention is arising. I invite you to lower your hands, perhaps lifting your gaze if your eyes were closed. And from here, we will transition to a little bit of movement. I'll invite you to stay where you are if you'd like. We will eventually stand up. If you're looking to stand up, go ahead and do that. But start with one of the movements that we have begun with for the previous weeks, and just allow for a little bit of movement in the shoulders, and allow for that circle to be something that moves in both directions, forward, back. And also, if it feels auspicious, you can go one shoulder at a time, having something that's symmetrical or something that's a little more unilateral. Just noticing if there's a rhythm that warms up the shoulders a little bit. And then once you're ready, perhaps coming to a standing shape. And from a standing shape, perhaps continuing a few of those shoulder circles as you begin to find your stance. Perhaps picking the toes up and spreading the toes down in order to ground down and feeling the strength of the legs. Maybe lifting the kneecaps and feeling the stability at the pelvic floor. And then if you feel like you've explored the shoulders enough, perhaps transitioning to a simple sun breath, inviting the arms to inhale and rise up, and exhale and fall down. Now you may notice that you'd rather have more shoulder circles, or maybe you're ready to play with this arm movement. And I'll invite you to play with the inhale up and exhale down, but be sure to take this movement in synchronicity with the breath pattern that works best for you. And you may notice that you want a little more activation in this movement. Perhaps your arms are coming up and down a little faster than mine. And maybe you're noticing that you're already a little hypermobile or hyperactive and restless, and that's what's fueling that fast movement. So perhaps that means checking in with a little slower, more deliberate and steady movement. Notice if your tendency is to be really slow, maybe even sluggish, and notice if there's a little bit of activation and a little bit more kinetic pace that could perhaps bring you into this balanced sensation. So noticing tendencies of tamas, rajas, and inviting that sense of sattva, that more equal and balanced sensation. After you're done with the next breath cycle, I invite you to let your hands come down to the sides. So we're playing with a little bit of kriya in this opening movement today. So hopefully that first kriya movement just kind of got you a base of a stance. If you need to shift that, go ahead and do that, but we'll be going through a couple of these synchronized movements. They won't be quite as long as typical kriyas, but we will go through a couple of these movements, and I'll invite you again to find that pace that works best for you. The movements get a little bit more complex. So allow yourself to explore these movements in a way that works best for you. The next one is a side bend. So we'll play with this side bend by bringing one arm up and letting the other arm come down. It's got a little bit of a monkey thing going on here, huh? So allowing this side bend to take place laterally, and just naturally notice if a rhythm is present that perhaps you're choosing to shift, or maybe there's something that's already got a lot of an alignment to it. And once you've been in this kriya movement for a little while, you may have a little bit different perspective about dominant tendencies. So you could be going really fast through this. Maybe it's later in the day where you are, you're warmed up. Maybe it's still very early for you and it's a nice slow movement from side to side. Maybe it's something that's a lot more slow in pace and perhaps even less in range of motion. So think about how those qualities are showing up. And if you're moving with some velocity, if you're moving with a lot of pace, then start to slowly come down, slowly slow down. And eventually arrive back at the center. Allow your arms to rest, and then I'll invite you to bring the hands to heart center. Just take a moment to tune in again and notice any shift that has occurred or might have occurred as a result of your practice. And we'll continue to invite this tune in throughout our practice today. So just noticing if there's any story about that, without getting caught up in it, without having to chase it away. Just invite a sense of curiosity here. And for our next movement, we'll invite a twist. And this twist has a little bit of arm movement. You can take the opposite hand to the center of the pec muscle, maybe the upper pec muscle, and then the other arm will swing around towards the kidney or adrenal on the backside. So you'll take the arms with a little bit of a swing. They may come all the way down, they may not, they may stay with a little bit of an elbow bend there. And you may also have a little bit of a knee bend, perhaps, if that feels auspicious for you. Once again, this movement, rotating from side to side at the pace that works best for you. Noticing if this is a really familiar move, if you've done this kriya before, then perhaps you jump right into it. Maybe you've never done this before and it feels really silly. Just notice if there's a story there. Invite a curiosity about the experience moving in this twist. Noticing the quality of the tap. Just noticing if a fast pace or a slow pace is something you naturally fall into, dominating, or if it's something that you're choosing to intentionally bring a sense of balance. And if you're moving quickly in the rotation, start to slow it down without stopping abruptly. Just let it slowly begin to settle. Allow yourself to come back to the center. And one more time, bring the hands to heart center. and tune in. Just notice if you have played with the speed and kinetic movements. Notice how the body has a way of self-regulating, coming back to a sense of homeostasis. How that might be a little different duration of time and different qualities surrounding it, depending on the activity. But you might notice that your respiratory rate, your heart rate, sensations in the tissues are evolving as we check in between movement. For our next movement, we have two options. So one will be a little bit like what we did a couple weeks ago with this kind of standing cat-cow. So you can open up on an inhale and maybe round a little bit on an exhale. You could take this with the arms wrapping if that feels good to you in the standing posture. You might have a little bit of a bend in the knees. Or if you'd like to play with something even more energizing, you can play with this frog kriya. So a couple blocks at the top of the mat, coming into a squat position, and then perhaps playing with where your handprint fits best. You could do this with a chair or a table that's in front of you, but you'll come into this kind of squat shape. You notice my heels are off the ground. This is an inhale here, and then an exhale as you rise up and round. So inhale and exhale, and this will be very energizing, obviously pushing down and rising up. It's a large movement, so take a moment to check in to see if that's something that you'd like to play with. This cat-cow might feel a lot more auspicious, or you might get here and realize, gosh, there's a little bit of dullness or sluggishness that I would like to find balance with, and maybe there's just a short duration of time playing on the blocks. But take a few moments to go at the pace that works best for you, taking care of yourself with the right footprint, taking breaks, noticing the sensations unfolding in your body. Beautiful variety of choices demonstrated on the screens. And wherever you are, notice if you can slowly begin to come back to your stance without any abrupt change. Just let it slowly evolve back into a stance. If your heels were off the floor, if you were in that squat position, just take a moment to ground through your legs again. Invite a little bit of extension through the top of the head. And tune in. Just checking in to the nervous system and noticing any shift that's unfolding. For our next move, we're going to play a little bit with a familiar shape. I think we played with this almost every week so far. We're going to play a little bit with this half hinge. So you can come to the top of the mat, or we played a little bit with this at the wall as well. So if you haven't had a chance to play with the hinge, if this is one of your first times that you're joining us, take a moment to place the blocks in front, or maybe you can have a chair in front of you as well. And take a moment to work into this half lift shape, this half deadlift, this half hinge. You can use the blocks to help support you and ground down through your legs and kind of feel that vertical work that's going on to ground down and support up. One of the things you feel in the hinge, the reason why you go against the wall, is because you feel your tailbone kind of rise up. Maybe you feel the top of the femur leaning back in order for that to happen. Maybe noticing for a moment how much weight is on the blocks. Noticing how bent the knees are, and just ground down, reach up and feel that vertical stability through the load-bearing limbs, your lower extremities, and then start to become aware of this horizontal line that happens through the spine, from the tailbone to the crown of the head, and just notice if you can recruit a little bit of stability here. If maybe it's very accessible to you to just bring in a little bit of core strength. If it doesn't feel very accessible, invite yourself to just play with a little bit of engagement there. One of the ways to do that might be just to invite a laugh. You can also do like a lion's breath, sticking your tongue out. Notice what happens there. Notice how that recruits strength through the center that allows you to take this kind of L shape. And if you have that strength in the center that makes you feel like you can support that, maybe play a little bit with the hands. If you'd like to extend your hands out to the sides like an airplane, perhaps coming into this L shape here, or maybe extending the hands forward and noticing the difference between those two arm placements. And just taking a moment to find that vertical and horizontal engagement and imprint that shape into the body. And when you're ready, ground through the legs and rise back up with the strength of the legs coming back to your standing shape. So we'll play with that a little bit more at the wall. So we're going to take this L shape toward the wall. So facing the wall, we'll come into kind of a plank at the wall. So just come into the shape of a push-up as you walk your hands back. If it doesn't feel comfortable for you to fall right into the wall, just step close to the wall and gently begin to walk your legs back. And at some point, you'll be ready to walk down a little bit with the hands and begin to reach the hips up and back and see if you can find your L shape at the wall. So you may need to walk your feet forward or back. You may need to play a little bit with finding the hand position. Notice how much you're using the wall, and definitely use the wall for some of this exploration. And then notice how you can hand off the task to the legs, and then notice where there's balance between the arms and the legs. So there's a lean in, a push against the wall, but there's also an extension back and up with the tailbone, grounding down through the legs. Vertical, horizontal, effort at both ends of those lines of energy, directional forces. You can always go back to the blocks if you prefer them. You can use a chair. And once you've engaged in that press down and press away from the wall, then slowly come back to your stance. And we'll play a little bit with that shape on the floor. So slowly making your way down onto the floor, maybe starting with tabletop shape. So from the tabletop, just take a little moment to shrug the shoulders up and down and just notice what it feels like to switch from the hands being against the wall to the hands being down on the floor. And just notice if you might want to find shoulders distance base. If your base is a little too tight, then you might feel crowding in your shoulders. You might feel crowding in your collarbone. So just take a moment to measure that out, knowing that if the hands are at least as wide as the shoulders, you'll have enough of a base to provide a little bit more stability. The other thing that might be nice, if you feel any tension in the wrists, is you may want to use a wedge or just a little rolled up blanket to allow for a little bit more obtuse angle here. And from that shape, so you've warmed up the shoulders and you can really kind of feel the strength of the arms pressing down into the floor. I invite you to flip the toes. And as if you're pushing the floor away, start to draw the belly in, push the floor away to invite the hips up and back. And one more time, checking into that L shape. So we've just played with the L shape, hinging forward and against the wall. Just take a moment to see if that's a shape now that you can feel in this down dog shape. The arms will feel nice if they're nice and broad, but there's an internal rotation at the shoulders without moving your hands any further apart, without externally rotating your hands, just your shoulders coming in, or internally rotating your shoulders. Invite a lift through the tailbone, and maybe invite the heels to ground. They're not going to necessarily touch the ground, but invite the reach to ground through the heels. If at any point you'd like to come down into child's pose or rocks pose to sit down, notice what the dominant tendency is, and if you'd like to balance that out. If you're feeling sluggish and you'd like to stay in this shape and really reach through the legs and the arms, adding a little bit more rajas, adding a little bit more energy. Or if you notice that you're already super hyper, the heart rate's going, the respiratory rate's going, maybe you notice that it's time to come down and come into a tabletop shape instead. And we'll play just with one more shape in this downward dog shape, and that is from downward dog. I'll invite you to, I'm a little bit close to the wall, so I'll walk forward. Perhaps come into this L shape with one leg up and one leg down. So once again, you're pushing the floor away and grounding down, but we've continued this line of energy pushing into the floor by extending the leg up and back. And I have a wall close enough where I can rest my foot. I'm not intentionally doing that, but it's nothing wrong with that. Maybe allowing the head and shoulders to rest. Once again, choosing the shape, choosing the level of effort that serves you best. If you try it on one side, try it on the other side, and notice how one side has a different story than the other without getting caught up with it, without having to chase it away. Just inviting a curiosity as you explore the experience. Beautiful shapes. And when you're ready, come on down into either a seated position. You can take your legs out in front of you if you'd like, or sit on a block. But just take a moment after that down dog, bringing the hands to heart center, and just check into the nervous system one more time. Perhaps closing your eyes, bringing the awareness inward. And just notice how the nervous system starts to self-regulate all by itself. From this seated shape, we're going to once again play with L shape. So we've got that kind of intersection of horizontal and vertical. And for this, it might be nice to have a blanket. You can always put a blanket underneath the bum just a little bit. So sits bones. You could roll this up to be a little bit higher if that feels better for you and your shapes. But take a moment to find the support that works best for you and invite an extension through the legs. And after we've been playing with this extension through the spine. So there's an extension there, but there's still the natural curves of the spine, just as we started with our seated position, our forward, our half fold, our fold against the wall. Here we are inviting that upward extension, this vertical plumb line through the torso. And maybe it's enough to just keep the hands down. You could also use blocks behind you if that feels nice, so that you can keep those natural curves without over efforting in any way. You might also play with the arm positions that we explored in that half lift shape, perhaps even reaching the arms up. And just taking a moment to notice how that shape has been imprinted in these different orientations. And we'll slowly transition. For me, on this next one, I will remove the blanket. You may or may not decide to do that. But we're going to come into this boat shape, this same L, and allow for the legs to extend and the spine to extend, creating that same L, but balancing it on the sits bones. So you can always hold on here. There's nothing wrong with having a little bend in your knees. It's just the spirit of the legs being extended, or maybe there is an effort to extend, noticing where you'd like to put that effort, more rajasic, more tamasic, maybe even just gently planting the fingertips down. Good thumbs up there. You could also add a little bit more rajas to this if you want. You can play with rocking your boat from side to side if you want more of that kinetics. If you're looking for a little more activation, you can extend and bring the knees in with the arm movement as well. But we're starting to build a little bit more of that strength in the center. Noticing that engagement like a laugh, that lion's breath that we invited, and that forward lean that helps to engage the core. And then from there, when you're ready, taking a moment to settle back into the seat. And maybe if you're okay staying in the shape, perhaps just checking into the nervous system one more time. Just a brief check-in. From the next shape, we'll play with this L shape against the wall. And we'll start by having a seat against the wall. Take a moment to see if you can bring your hips all the way to the wall and invite that experience of the L, extending the legs horizontal, extending the spine vertical. And from there, maybe extending the arms upward. Now, notice how the arms end up here without forcing the issue. The arms might not come all the way to the wall, right? Notice if that's not auspicious for the shoulders. And if that's the case where the arms don't feel good against the wall or they just stop short, take a moment to scooch your hips forward a little bit. And then see if that angle allows for your hands and your arms to line up with the wall a little more. And I should have invited you to bring a prop here, but a strap or a block, something to just kind of note where exactly your feet end up, depending on how the arm position reaches the wall. So if it's with a straight line, just kind of note where the footprint is. And if you're scooching forward, that block or that strap will be slightly forward. And from there, we're going to play with a little work on against the wall and continuing with our L shape. So we'll come to this tabletop shape, and you might want to watch me for this first go around and then play with it a little bit yourself. But we're going to place the hands down. Once again, shoulders distance is going to allow for a lot more room in the collarbone and the shoulders, providing enough of a base. And then once again, we're going to come into that down dog shape, flipping the toes, drawing the belly in, and reaching the hips up and back. And then slowly, after measuring the handprint, we'll start to walk up the wall. And see if we can invite this L shape in this half handstand. Just notice how that feels, maybe coming down to check in and play. You could also play a little bit with the one-legged variation that we played with in down dog. Maybe playing a little bit with how much the toe is against the wall, and just seeing what kind of playfulness you'd like to explore there. And this is something that may take a few goes to become comfortable with, right? Just walking up the wall. How do I walk up the wall? Where do my hands go? So we can play with that on each side, exploring the one-legged version as well. Alternatively, we could also take that same L shape in a warrior three shape. So a warrior three shape might be best supported with a chair. So I have a chair that's against a wall here. You could use a desk or a table if that's more convenient for you. But you'll have to, once again, kind of play with the measurement in terms of how far away the chair is for you and your arms, the length of your torso. But I'll ground down through my left leg to start, and then start with this hinge forward, and maybe just allowing for the back toe to kind of take the bus, taking a few stops on the way as my arms extend forward until I can maybe find the chair. And then feel, where does it feel most auspicious for the hinge to take place? And you're playing once again with that vertical and horizontal extension, and then maybe even playing with some of the hand position in warrior three. So you could also play a little bit with the wall. A chair is probably easier because you can come down on top of it, and you could even have it land up the wrist or the forearm a little bit. And this is a little time for you to play with the intensity, activity, grounding, and taking a moment to maybe check into the nervous system before switching sides. If you'd like to return to that down dog shape, that's another option. If you're in the warrior three shape, as you extend the leg back, invite the hips back as well. So you'll invite both hips to just shift back, that same mechanism that we played with in the half hinge. If you were to swan dive down and you allow the tailbone to kind of lift up against the wall, or the top of the femur leans back for that balance to occur, for that hinge to have leverage and balance and equilibrium. And of course, with warrior three, you have lateral challenge as well. And as you play with this, once again, check into all the layers of experience, especially noticing the dance between the body and the breath. Maybe noticing any dominant tendency. Ooh, legs up against the wall. I'm definitely going upside down. Ooh, legs up against the wall. No thanks. I'm never going to try that. And just making the choice that's most auspicious to meet your practice in a way that best serves you to bring that balance. You can also return to the down dog, three-legged dog shape, if that's something that sounds inviting for you as well. Nice. Nice warrior 3J. Great shapes, great variations. Earl, Valentina, great L's. Taking a child's pose is a really great choice. Beautiful. Warrior 3, the down dog. Just noticing this, how this imprint has maybe started to inform how that shape can unfold in a different orientation. When you feel like you've explored your playtime enough, you can start to make your way into either a child's pose, or maybe it's just Rock's pose. Once again, having a seat and taking the hands to heart center. And if you're finishing up playing, just take a moment to decide how you'll bring balance to whatever side you were playing with. But once again, checking into all the layers of self, noticing if there's been any shift physically in the tissues, in the body, noticing the experience of the vital self and the breath. Noticing if the mind has a story to tell about today's practice. And just checking in with your wise, intuitive self that is hopefully very active in providing guidance and choosing the right amount of work for this practice today. And when you're ready, take a moment to find a strap. Once you have your strap handy, take a moment to slowly begin to come down onto your back, whichever way is comfortable for you. Maybe it's slowly rolling down through the spine, or maybe slowly coming down to your side and rolling onto the back. And having your strap nearby, just take a moment to bring the knees into the chest and just gently, they don't have to come to the chest, just invite them in that direction. Just take a moment to feel the ground beneath your spine in this new orientation. Maybe it feels nice to rock and settle and feel grounded on the spine. And then when you're ready, you guessed it, one more L shape. So we'll take the strap across the soles of the feet and invite an extension through the knees, extending the legs upward, extending the feet upward. And consider the distance between the feet, maybe bringing a little bit of engagement as you reach the legs up. So we've been playing with the awareness of the intersection of these two lines, horizontal and vertical. So think about what it takes to extend those legs up and how the strap might invite that extension. And it's fine wherever they are. It's just that spirit of extending. Doesn't have to be perfectly 90 degrees every time, obviously, as an example with the wall and down dog and all of our shapes. If a little bit of a knee bend feels good, that's fine. Consider if you might want to allow the straps to come, or allow your elbows to even ground with the straps, so that there's maybe even more of a sense of grounding. And how does that perhaps invite more of a sense of extension upward? Notice if there's an expression through the toes. And notice if you have wrapped the straps around your wrist, and how that might feel very different from using your grip strength to hold on to the straps and feeling that engagement. It's not that one is right or wrong. It's just that you can check in and see how different they feel. And after you've played with that extension, invite that same shape to take place with one leg. So slowly releasing one leg from the loop, from the strap, and allowing it to come down, and noticing where you'd like to, once again, play with the angle of the L. Maybe playing with the arms grounding as well. And notice if there's an extension through the leg that you lowered down that helps to bring more awareness to this horizontal line. The body supported by the floor. Notice if you have a tendency to bring this L into something really acute, and maybe something that doesn't feel very auspicious for the hamstring. So maybe notice that if it's something less than an acute angle, maybe it's 90 or obtuse, but engagement with the strap, which might end up feeling like a very different sensation or just a slightly different sensation. And once you've explored that on one side, perhaps checking in on the other side as you're ready. So maybe there's a few more breath cycles for you before you switch sides. That's fine. Coming into that L shape. Noticing the difference from one side to the other. Definitely acknowledging how one side might have a different story than the other, but not having to really get caught up in that story or block it out. And continuing to invite that experience to unfold, to invite a curiosity to explore the experience. But with this new orientation that has a large base that's grounded to support an extension up. Once you've taken the time to explore the strap and the L shape on each side, I invite you to play with the same expression without the strap, to see if maybe you've already done this, but if you haven't, consider maybe the option of extending the legs up. Maybe you're using your hands. Maybe you're just playing with the extension, 2 legs or 1, and just be a little bit curious, a little bit playful about finding that L. Maybe there's a point and flex of the feet, circling the ankles. I invite you to play with any final shapes that feel auspicious to you, something that is aligned with what we've explored today, before we play with one final shape. And for this last shape, we'll want to find some more wall space. And I'll show you one of the ways to get into this shape. Going to be to come close to the wall. And you're almost in this kind of like tabletop shape. So my mat is, I'm on my right hip and my mat is to the right. And I'm gonna thread my right arm underneath and then allow myself to roll onto the wall or onto my back so that my legs can come up the wall. And from that position, maybe just a few fidgets. And once again, notice if you want to come away from the wall, if that feels a little bit better. You don't need to have a strap for this, but some people like that. Some people like a little weight on top of the feet as well. But one more experience of this L shape with grounding that's both happening from the ground, from the horizontal and from the vertical orientations. And once you get into this shape, take a moment to settle. Maybe deciding a place for your hands. If you've been playing with straps, maybe your hands are busy and restless, maybe inviting a little bit of stillness. Maybe the hands to the heart to once again check in with the nervous system. And as you check in with this legs up the wall shape, see if there's any little adjustments that might make this shape feel more stable, something that's maybe more sustainable. If it's a blanket. And in the next few breath cycles, you can explore whether you would like to take your final resting shape as this legs up the wall shape, or if you would prefer to ground on the floor with your legs flat, with your legs in that horizontal orientation, maybe taking a blanket underneath the knees. And in the next few breaths, you can make that choice and begin to make your way into that shape. And if you've moved to the floor and you considered perhaps some things to soften the floor, like blankets, or maybe if it's cold where you are, a blanket that covers you, as we embrace a little stillness for an extended period of time. Take that moment to very intentionally settle into the shape that you've decided to embody for your final resting pose, and invite a sense of surrender. You've made your decision for your hands, you've made your decision for your eyes. And embrace that sense of grounding along with that sense of surrender. Taking a moment to connect to the body, noticing all the qualities that are a result of your work today, your practice. Taking a moment to tune in to the breath, noticing any shift that's occurred as a result of your breath work and the rest of your practice. And gently tuning in to the mental, emotional experience. Noticing this experience of observing yourself. You may have had a very active practice, or you may have had a very grounding practice. You may have a little bit of both. Whatever the qualities of the practice today, just take a moment to absorb them into all of your layers. Perhaps there was a glimpse of some sattvic balance, some harmony and equanimity. Just let those soak into you as you begin to surrender in this shape, feeling supported by the earth. And this time, without having to move your hands to heart center, just invite your awareness once again to that heart center space. Just noticing this place where we have been bringing our awareness throughout the practice to tune into the nervous system. And as you draw your attention there, I invite you to imagine a gentle, glowing light. A gentle glow at your heart center that's warm and luminous and very sattvic, that middle light. And with each inhale, invite a sense of nourishing this luminous glow. And as you exhale, invite a sense of this luminous glow expanding. As you inhale, nourishing this glow, and as you exhale, noticing this glow expanding beyond the heart center, through the chest, through the torso, down the pelvis. Breathing in to kindle the warmth of the glow, and breathing out, carrying this light into the extremities of the arms and the legs. Breathing in as you nourish this glow. Breathing out and feeling this luminous glow expand into the hands, the fingers, the feet, the toes, through the face, through the crown of the head. As you breathe in to nourish this luminous sattvic light, exhaling and feeling the expansion beyond the tips of the fingers, the tips of the toes, beyond the crown of the head, out into the world, into your environment, into your loved ones, your community. As you breathe in, feeling this luminous glow growing, nourishing, kindling. And breathing out, noticing a sense of this luminous glow expanding throughout your community and becoming aware of the luminous glow of all the other members of your community, and this overlapping of the luminous light. Just taking a moment to embrace the radiance of all the other luminous lights connected by that sattvic experience. Having this shimmering dance of an amplified equanimity. Maybe holding that sense of joy or potential for joy in that connection. Holding that as you gently bring that light back toward your center, slowly back towards the heart center. Slowly coming back to the center of your being, maybe noticing that that light exists there and is available to you at any time. You can continue to hold this image of the light in your imagination or choose to let it go as we sit for 2 minutes of silence. And you'll hear my voice at the end of those 2 minutes. Invite your awareness back to the breath. Invite the awareness back to the body. Invite the awareness back to all the layers of experience, and invite any little subtle movements that allow you to start to awaken the body after this prolonged stillness. And begin to track in your mind's eye a plan to Slowly make your way to a seated position, perhaps rolling over to your side and gently lifting yourself off the floor to find that seated shape. If your legs are up the wall, taking the time to gently come down and take as much time as you need in the next 30 to 60 seconds to find your seated position. And once you've found your seated shape, one more time, take a moment to settle and ground, invite an expansion upward. I invite you to take your hands to heart center if that feels auspicious to you, perhaps bowing your head and closing your eyes. And bringing your awareness back to the intention you set at the beginning of class. Maybe noticing if any change has occurred in that intention, or if a new intention has shown up. And also notice if there's anything that you'd like to take with you from this practice today. Considering that intention or any note of any change, I invite you to breathe that into your heart. And with your exhale, send it out. Thank you all for sharing your practice with me this morning. It's been a pleasure and an honor to practice with you. We will take a 10-minute bio break, and 300-hour students, you have a link in your Google Classroom for your debrief. And for 200 hours, we'll stay here and return in that after that 10-minute break.
Thank you, Yeno.
Thank you, Gino. It was a wonderful class. Thank you.
Wonderful class. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Ming.
Thanks, Gino.
Good to see you, Rebecca.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Valentina.
Thank you,
Hi,
Gino.
Allison. Hi, Allison. Good to see you.